So I start by saying welcome to everybody. Is this the idea?
Yeah,
Yay! Okay. Uh, welcome everybody. My name is Dimitris Bouchalis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Tourism Review, and today we've got Tse Leong and Daisy Fan, who are the senior associate editors who are going to run the show for us. And then we've got my good friend and colleague Dick Butler and Farouk Seitoglu. Hopefully we'll have one more panelist who is coming in a minute. Before we start, I'm going to say that Tourism Review is going to be celebrating 80 years in next year. So we are going to listen to from some of the authors who have contributed to the celebratory issue that is going to be coming out probably as 80, volume 80, issue 1 in a few months in beginning of January, and is going to look into the future of tourism research for global prosperity. That is a generic title that we have, and we've asked people to look towards 2050. I don't want to keep you waiting for the great presentation. So welcome to the webinar. And Daisy, who is currently in Macau, and it's probably midnight for her, is going to run the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitris. Dimitris and myself will be moderating this section today. Once again, thank you everyone online. Thank you everyone from our panelists for accepting our invitation today for this webinar organized by Tourism Review with the topic Shaping the Future of Tourism Research for Global Prosperity. A very brief agenda for today. I think Dimitris finished half of the welcome, and then I will go through the rest of it, having the introduction very briefly introduce everyone from the panel. And then our panelists will have a 10 minutes presentation from each of them with 5 minutes Q&A. We may pick up 1 or 2 questions from the online chat box, and then we have a very brief discussion. And if we still have some time at the end, we may invite everyone from the panel back, may have some together discussion, only if we have some time. Okay, so that's the plan now. And then please allow me to just briefly go through some of the statistics for Tourism Review. We know it starts from 1946, and now I think we have ever increasing impact factor submission numbers since then, especially since 2017. Here shows all the facts, including the impact factor, set score, etc. Tourism Review, we accept a very general topic on tourism-related articles, but we particularly encourage articles that explore knowledge and theories and provide innovative and exploratory analysis towards the future. Some other statistics, we can see the keep increasing line regarding these downloads. This shows all our top downloads from both the countries and also our institutions. We can see the majority of them from Asia, and the top, dominated by China, UK, and Australia from download countries. Citation by year and also citation factors is also keep increasing. Regarding the authorship, we can see it's really dramatically. We got a lot of submission from especially Asia, but we also from submission from other parts of the world. Here shows all the top institutions who submitted and also authors in our journal. Last, we show all the submission numbers from different kind of institutions and also from different part of the countries. As we can see, the majority of the submissions we receive right now from Asia, particularly China. So that's why we're trying to organize more and more activities, webinars, events in other parts of the world. For example, North America, Africa, some other European countries. We try to diversify, and we particularly welcome authors and submissions from all over the world. So that's our goal for the journal. Okay, why we're having this webinar today, we know this is almost 80 years anniversary for Tourism Review by next year. And to celebrate this anniversary, we're initiate this special issue called Horizon 2050. We try to invite a lot of scholars all over the world, try to provide their insights according to their perspective area. And most importantly, we ask them to provide some future directions for the agenda in the research. So that's the main purposes for this special issue. And also today in this webinar, we try to invite several of the well-established scholars who can share their views in our field, especially about their view about the future in the agenda. So that's the purpose for today. I'm sure you don't want to listen to me and Demetrius all the time, but still, I still have a goal to introduce all our panelists for today. We are very glad to have 5 of the panelists today. I'd like to use a very short time to introduce every one of them just by reading through their bios, but I'm sure you may know most of them very well. Okay, so the presentation will start with Professor Rick Butler. Dr. Richard Butler, a geographer, is a emeritus professor of tourism at University of Strathclyde. He has consulted for numerous agencies, governments, and for UNWTO, and has supervised over 40 doctoral students, published 28 books, and over 200 papers and book chapters. His main research area are destination development, accessibility, tourism war and political change, indigenous tourism, and tourism in peripheral areas. He is a founding member and the past president of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism and was awarded the UNWTO Ulysses Medal for excellence in the creation and dissertation and the dissemination of knowledge. Our second speaker is Dr. Cici Leung. She is associate professor and graduate program coordinator in the Department of Hospitality and Tourism Management at University of North Texas. Her research interests including information technology, social media, hospitality management, and destination marketing. She has published over 90 articles in hospitality and tourism journals and received 16 research awards. She is an associate editor for Tourism Review and Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management, and serves on the editorial board for 9 top-tier hospitality and tourism journals. Our third presenter will be Dr. Bandagu Okumas. She has work experience in the hospitality industry, particularly in food preparation, food services, and event management. Her research focuses on disability, food safety, food waste in hotels, eating behavior and eating habits, food and culinary tourism, food waste, and health well-being in the tourism and hospitality sector. Dr. Optimus has worked in multidisciplinary teams and secured completed research grants. She has authored, co-authored numerous academic journal articles, conference presentations, books, and book chapters. Our fourth presenter will be Dr. Jim Patrick. He is a research fellow and associate department head for research in the Department of Hospitality, Tourism, Hotel Management, and Tourism at Texas A&M University. He is also co-editor of one of the field's top journals, the Journal of Travel Research. His research applied marketing and psychology disciplines to better understand tourist purchase behaviors, as well as the psychophysiological effects both travel and nature have on the humans. He is a devoted husband, father to 2 extraordinary daughters, and an avid cyclist and golfers who loves cheese. Our last presenter, Dr. Frederick Saritonglu. He is a researcher at the University of Aveiro, Portugal, and an associate professor at Martin Atuklu University, Turkey. His research interests including technology and robots in tourism and hospitality, destination management and marketing, tourism planning and development, and tourist behavior and experience. He is a social editor for the European Journal of Tourism Research and the Journal of Tourism and Development. Only by reading through those bios, I already feel very excited. So I think without further ado, may I please invite our very first speaker, Professor Butler, to have his talk for us. And we can start. Let me turn on the slides. Okay, good.
Thank you, Daisy. Let me just add one other thing. I am, I think, the only person here who is older than the journal. And that's a key fact in terms of it does allow me to do one of the things Demetrius asked us to do when we were preparing the Horizon papers, which was also to look back in order to be able to look forward. So the first few slides I'll go through fairly quickly are essentially setting the scene and looking back. So next slide. One of the things with looking back is hindsight is a wonderful thing, perhaps. But we do have a habit of identifying at the present what are key moments and events. The elections coming up in the US. You know, in 30 years' time, we may look back and say, what were we worried about? What was the problem? Nothing really happened. So we have to be careful when we're looking back that what we talk about is game-changing developments and so on. We may be creating patterns that didn't actually exist. We may be highlighting things that really weren't important at the time. And even with hindsight, we miss things that are particularly important. So looking back is tricky and sometimes dangerous. Next slide. One of the things with, thanks. One of the things I note over the 80 years since the journals and I started, tourism is poorly served by its definitions. I think in all of the journals, I don't want to see us perpetually repeat definitions, but we are very poor at stating what it is we are dealing with. Tourism is not international travel. It's holiday travel. It's temporarily relocating and moving back home for pleasure. And so a lot of the figures on international arrivals are misleading. They're not necessarily tourism related. And then we tend to cover very quickly and very casually the domestic tourism by saying, oh, it's 4 to 5 or 6 or 7 times bigger than international tourism. Then we go back to being worried about too many tourists in Venice or in Barcelona. I think the domestic tourism aspect is something which in the future we should be paying much more attention to, and I think it's going to become, and I'll explain why, more significant in the future than it is, even if it doesn't make it into a lot of the journals now. Next slide. We know what has caused all the rise and the changes in tourism over the last 80 years. They're well documented. They all assume a measure of stability. And of course, with COVID, with wars and so on, stability is forgotten. It was Margaret Thatcher that said, we have to expect the unexpected. And when we're forecasting and looking to the future, of course, we don't know what is the unexpected, and we need to bear that in mind when we're making prognostications about the future. Next slide. One thing about tourism is it's very old. We can document tourism back 12,000 years in Turkey. It still has at its heart movement. We leave, we go somewhere temporarily, we come back. And the key to that, and the absolute key to tourism, is transport. Next slide. So transport is really important for 2 reasons. One, that it enables tourism. Without transport, there cannot be tourism because it implies movement. The second thing, and I think it's passing, but important to bear in mind, every form of transport that we have invented, every mode, becomes a form of recreation and tourism. We walk for pleasure, we ride horses for pleasure, we sail boats for pleasure, we fly airplanes for pleasure, we certainly drive for pleasure. The only one we haven't done so far to any significant degree individually is use rockets for pleasure. Now, next slide. So what has been significant in transportation in tourism is the innovation within modes. Now, if I make one point I'd like to stress, every significant change in tourism in its spatial extent, which is my main focus, where it's gone, what places it's gone to in the world, have all come about because of innovations within the node, within the type of travel. And in the last 80 years, there has been no new mode of travel, no significant change in mode. And that I think is significant because, trains have improved massively. We can go 300-400 kilometers an hour. We may get into a magnetic tube and go faster, but it's still a train. Cars are changing. We can have autonomous taxis and so on, but it's fiddling with the mode. And we haven't had a new mode in 80 years. So next slide. Now, if we look at the transportation changes, they've done one simple thing. They've changed the top line there: access, cost, time, comfort, safety, convenience. They all improved, however you want to define improvement. Stuff is safer, cheaper, less time involved to travel the same distance, increased comfort, increased convenience, increased access to many more areas. All of them have resulted in increased tourism. And I'm not sure if you can make out on my screen, the bottom line is disappearing a little bit. What it says at the bottom is the type of tourism, the amount of tourism, the time spent, the location of tourism, and the satisfaction. Now, what those transportation innovations have done is allow us more types of tourism. They've allowed us an increased amount of tourism. They've allowed us increased time because travel time has reduced. So potentially the time we can spend in tourism has gone up. We've changed the location. We can go from anywhere you are to anywhere else in the world in less than 24 hours. So technically, we could go anywhere in the world for a weekend if we've got the money. And lastly, we've changed the satisfaction. That's something I won't go into. It's not a field I know. But my point is, all of those affect the volume, the type, and the place of tourism. And when we look to the future, then we have to see what is coming up. Next slide. So what's going to happen in the future? Well, I'm guessing, as everybody else is guessing, access. Yes, access will continue to improve. Possibly, it will go backwards in some areas. We are the first generation, your generation, not mine particularly, in which we've seen a reduction in speed. Concorde is cancelled. There is no supersonic transport for people in tourism or anywhere else. We may get it back, but globally it will not matter. We are stuck for the foreseeable future to 2050 globally for the masses with the transport we've got now. We will play around the edges. We will improve access to some areas. In some areas, as I'll say in a minute, we may cut back. Cost is probably, almost certainly, not going to get cheaper. It's going to get dearer. So that's a negative change if we're looking at the spread and the universality of tourism. Time is not going to improve. We're not going to be cutting the time down very much. We are tied to hubs and feeders to hubs and to conventional aircraft. There'll be aircraft speed has not gone up significantly. The concentration has been on fuel efficiency and capacity of planes. And convenience will go down. There can't be any doubt in my mind about that, that personal convenience in travel will deteriorate, partly because of numbers, partly because of other constraints put on it. Confidence, safety, which are critically important, but not important. We take them for granted. And they will probably slightly improve over the future. In terms of tourism, I don't see significantly globally, in terms of the spatial spread of tourism, much change in type, possibly a reduction in sometimes. The amount of tourism will continue to increase. The time that we can spend in locations, the time we spend in travel will probably get less, and the location choice may get significantly less because of constraints, and satisfaction may well get less. So what I'm saying is, as a result of where transport is, we're probably going to be more negative than positive in the future. Next slide. One of the things Demetrius asked us to look at in the articles was COVID, and briefly the effect of COVID. To me, globally, in terms of where tourism goes, COVID was a blip. It's already gone. Now, I recognize personally to people and to particular enterprises, it's a catastrophe of unforeseen dimensions and horror. But to tourism overall, it's a blip. There is no significant change in global patterns as a result of COVID. There may be significant local change in some areas during and immediately after the pandemic. But to a lot of people's disappointment, particularly academics, tourism is back to normal or even increased from normal. Next slide. This is really the last one you'll be glad to hear in terms of time. What's going to happen? Well, I think the spatial pattern of tourism essentially will remain stable by 2050. A few changes at the edges, some new destinations, some fading out. But remember, when we talk about destinations fading out, and this is my only mention of the tourism area life cycle, the old destinations are not dead. Blackpool in England, which developed in the 1850s, still gets 19 million visitors a year. Not quite Venice, but not far off it. Yet we dismiss them. We forget about them. If climate change requirements demand significant changes in travel, then they will find a new hope and a new future. So that second point there, local level new destinations will appear, or old ones will reappear. And I think we will face, whether we like it or not, and whether we can do anything about it or not, long haul travel problems resulting from climate change controls. If we are taking climate change seriously, aircraft fuel will be taxed, cruise ship fuel will be taxed appropriately, constraints will be put on travel. And so long-haul destinations will have major problems similar to what they had with COVID. And they will not really, many of them, be able to turn to domestic tourism to replace their international component. Certainly small places like Fiji have no hope of their tourism industry surviving on Fijian populations alone. So, mode changes. We've seen, and I just put up one reference there that just came out, if you can see it at the bottom, changes from plane to train. Now, that may prove very significant in certain parts of the world, Europe particularly, and that could therefore significantly change the spatial distribution of tourism in Europe if we go by train. But there are still big problems in traveling by train, of which time and cost is one. So let me conclude with 2 or 3 comments just to maybe start some arguments. we've rarely looked at what I think will be crucial in the future: substitution. What do people do if they can't do what they want to do? If their first choice is removed, what do they do? And we flirted with that in the 1980s. There was some work for Statistics Canada and probably other places to what people do if they can't do what they want to do. And we're going to have to face up to that. If you can't go to New Zealand, as I'm going next month to visit family, what do? We don't know. That's an area we really haven't looked at very much. There are three things I say that will influence tourism, where it goes, how much, how often, and so forth in the future. Price. We tend to accept price, but price is the mover of tourism. Why is Ryanair so successful? It's a horrible airline to travel, but every year its travel numbers go up, its destinations go up, and its profits go up generally because of price. And all the statements about how people are becoming more sustainable, 17 sustainable goals and whatever, they pale in comparison to price. And it's time we accepted we're not going to be able to beat price as a driver. Secondly, I think in the future, climate change and adjustments are going to be much more significant. And the other reason we move for tourism is climate and seasonality. Another set of drivers. And thirdly, and the one which I'm glad to say is receiving more attention, and some of you are working in it, and that is the function and the role of the media, which has assumed far more importance in determining where people go or telling them where they should go. We may have to tell them more with the media where they can't go or where they're not going to be able to go. So price, weather, if you like, climate, seasonality, and the media will be the drivers of tourism in the future. Okay, last slide is just my email. If somebody has a bright thought and wants to challenge me on it after this session is over some other time, I'll be happy to try and respond. Okay, I think I'm fairly close to the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Basler. So any questions? I cannot see much on our chat box. What about our panelists? Do we have any questions to ask?
There is one question in the question box.
I cannot see that.
I can read it. What about your understanding regarding the transportation tourism context of developing countries, especially for the South Asian context? Population density is so high and domestic tourism is also very high in this area.
I think Southeast Asia or Southern Asia has shown us a lot of the future. Apart from conventional tourism, I look at some of the activities in the Golden Week, for example, in China. I look at some of the copies, created villages in Vietnam, in China, in other countries, copying some of the villages in Europe and so on, that people are accepting and enjoying going to replicas. Now, I don't believe basically you can replicate Venice, for example, but you can simulate some aspects of it. I don't see virtual tourism as being a replacement for tourism. I see it as being a taster for tourism and not a replacement. But some of the artificial creations, theme parks, one type or another, I think will have to replace some of the travel to real places. I see ecotourism as diminishing in the future, not increasing. I think people will want to do it more. I don't think they will be able to because of constraints on travel. So I think Southeast Asia has a lot to show the rest of the world what can be done in terms of alternatives and substitutes for real travel to real places to alternatives. So I think we can learn a lot from that part of the world. And train travel there tends to be more efficient than it does in certainly in North America or South America. And I think we can learn a lot from the way that train travel in Asia has developed in terms of efficiency and speed. Whether it will be a satisfactory substitute for air travel over some places, I don't think it can be. But it is becoming a bigger player than it was before. I'm not sure if that quite answers the question, but I'll leave it at that.
Nick, you said something very interesting. You said that people were very disappointed, academics were very disappointed that tourism is back from COVID. That's an intriguing thought. Would you like to elaborate?
Well, there was a lot of attention in the tourism academic literature to how COVID was going to present a great opportunity to refocus, become more environmental, more sustainable, and so on. I think people looking at it realistically didn't think that was going to happen at all, because if you're in a tourism destination, it's kind of like, you know, if you're up the tree pursued by an alligator, it's hard to remember you're there to drain the swamp. You're concerned about tomorrow, and COVID hit tomorrow, today and tomorrow, as it were, a destination. They were not going to try to change. They were trying to recover as fast as they could. And I think it was a misreading, wishful thinking, basically, on and quite a number of academics that there would be a total refocus of tourism in a different direction. I think it was worth assumed that tourism is capable of being refocused. Tourism is millions of individual enterprises who are not controlled by anyone. So there is no central direction to tourism. It's what people in charge want to do at the time. And after COVID, their concern was to get back on their feet economically and to heck with everything else. And that is maybe reprehensible for the environment, but it's totally understandable. So the disappointment, I think, was academic disappointment, not industry disappointment, and not destination disappointment for the most part. That's what I meant when I said a lot of people were disappointed. I think it would be better if tourism was more sustainable. I don't have a lot of faith in the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. They're just common sense. I think they've been built up politically to be something they're not. I agree with all of them, but that's irrelevant to what is actually happening in tourism, I think.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I think due to the time, we have to move on to Cici for her presentation. Cici, are you ready?
Thank you, Daisy, and I enjoyed the presentation of Professor Richard. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may join us. My name is Cici Lang. I'm excited to be here to share some insights from my horizontal 2050 paper. This work was done in collaboration with Dr. Huang Huang from Hangzhou City University. Next. I put in the QR code here. So if you would like to read this paper, please scan the QR code to download the paper. If your institution doesn't subscribe to Tourism Review, no worries. Please send me an email and I'll be happy to share a copy with you after the webinar. But this article basically focused on how experimental design has been utilized in tourism research to advance their sustainable practices. Next slide. So to begin, please, I would like to clarify what we mean by an experiment in research. So an experiment is a study in which researchers deliberately manipulate one or more variables, the independent variables, to observe their effect on other variables, while keeping all other conditions consistent. This approach helps us explore cause and effect relationships, making experimental research particularly valuable in addressing real-world challenges like sustainability in tourism. So in general, we categorize knowledge in research knowledge into 3 levels. From bottom up is first level, second level, and third level. At the bottom level, we do descriptive research to generate first order knowledge. By first order knowledge, we mean like something like demographic profiles or preferences among tourists. Typically, we use survey design and the descriptive statistics. In the middle level, correlation research generates the second order knowledge, in which we explore relationships between variables, often through methods like regression or SEM. For example, we may say, oh, that tourism education possibly positively influence tourists' intention towards sustainable behaviors. And on the very top of this pyramid is causal research or experimental research design, which generates the highest level, third order knowledge. Experimental design is particularly impactful in tourism, where experiments can guide practitioners in tailoring their offerings to meet the needs of both tourists and employees to support sustainable development goals. Next slide. The main difference between experimental design and survey design is that in experimental design, there is a treatment given to participants that triggers some outcomes. Due to the time order of occurrence, that we can infer that the treatment is the cause of the outcome, therefore testing the causal relationship. Next slide. So this paper specifically explores how experimental design in tourism research drives sustainable tourism practices. And this question is aligned with 2 key SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 12, which promotes responsible consumption from the tourist perspective, and SDG 8, focusing on decent work conditions for tourism employees. Next. Experimental research in tourism has significantly evolved especially since 2005. So this paper reviews key literature from 2 perspectives, tourists and employees. From the tourist's perspective, sustainable practices are promoted through message framing, product offerings, and distribution channels. For example, gain framed message that highlights the positive outcomes of sustainable choices are generally more effective than loss framed ones. Emotional appeals and counterfactual thinking further enhance these message impacts. Additionally, providing nature-based experiences using gamification, incorporating visual cues have been effective in fostering pro-environmental attitudes. Digital innovations such as online ordering and virtual reality have further strengthened these efforts by shaping more responsible consumption behaviors. On the other side, research on employee well-being has been limited. The limited research highlights the benefits of supportive environments, effective leadership, and well-designed job roles on employee well-being and service quality. For example, technology like a VR training have shown to enhance learning and performance of employees, creating fair and healthy work environments not only benefits employees, but also contribute to the overall sustainability of the tourism industry. Next slide. So based on the review of previous literature and lessons learned from COVID, we propose a research framework um, including the three dimensions, external catalyst, internal forces, and the nexus to advance sustainable development in tourism through experimental studies. In this framework, technological advancements such as VR, AR, immersive technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, and big data propelling innovations throughout the tourism industry and worth further investigation in our field. The development of tourism theories serves as an internal force, offering conceptual foundations for future research. These theories are translated into practical applications, bridging the gap between abstract concepts and tangible industry practices. At the intersection of these external and internal forces lies rigorous experimental design, which serves as a nexus for aligning theoretical insights with real-world solutions. Rigorous experimental design, including carefully controlled field experiments, scenario realism, and process measurements, such as using neuroscience tools to measure actual behavior responses rather than self-imported intentions. These designs ensure the experimental findings are reliable and applicable, helping the tourism industry implement effective and evidence-based sustainability strategies. So at the end of this presentation, I would like to outline some compelling areas for future research on this topic. The future research agenda is organized into two key areas, the consumer focus and employee focus. From the tourist's perspective, some key topics include the exploration of tourists' decision-making processes within digital experience-scapes. And also like customers' reactions to various types of service robots, and like the impact of virtual tourism on actual consumer behavior, or we recommend examining effective methods for activating tourist green behavior, both at destination and post-vacation. Or we also recommend investigating the relationship between tourism experiences and tourists' psychological sustainability, such as thriving and vitality. So looking at from the employee side, we encourage attendees to explore the causality and underlying mechanism between work design and employees' well-being and resilience, particularly for frontline workers who face challenging customer interactions. So other areas include like the influence of technology adoption, such as ChatGPT, on employees' job performance, and also like the design of enterprise culture and job service, how that promote pro-social behavior, especially among Gen Z employees. And also, okay, so so these are all the topics we suggested, and we also like the researchers to think and consider or some other topics in this area and whether they are have the potential to promote tourists pro-environmental behaviors and improve employees' well-being. That's it for my presentation. Welcome any questions.
Thank you, Cici, for this very interesting topic. I think experimental design becomes more and more popular, and meanwhile being challenged to some extent because people becomes, or reviewers becomes more and more particular and picky on this topic. So this is very useful for our readers. Due to the time, I think we could maybe have a quick Q&A for Cici's presentation. I think this is a question from UNT as well. It said, hello, Dr. Cici, thank you for your presentation. What do you think about how, let me see, okay, how contribution of Atlas robots can help future tourism sector? Do you think it can help achieving SDG goals? Thank you.
Thank you, Sudashna, for your question. So yes, I think the robotic has been researched. The application of robotics in the hospitality and tourism sector has been researched a lot already. And we do so the research findings have kind of like both sides. They find positive side of using robotics to serve tourists. They also find the negative side of how robotics remove those human touch from the tourists. So on the positive side is convenience, and sometimes especially there's under embarrassing situations, people would be more likely to use robots instead of asking a human for services. But for the negative side, there's also stuff like the removing the human touch that some hospitality companies concerns about. In terms of how robotic related to SDG, I think there are also researchers finding out how we can design the robot, design what they are, the dialogues showing on the robots to encourage tourists or like hotel guests to pursue more green behaviors during the visits. So that has been already started and studied, and the findings are positive. On the other side, from the employee side, some research also find that the employees, they prefer to collaborate with some physical help from the robots instead of kind of like a mental help from the robots. So that will help employees so choose correct robots and design the job roles for the employees to take full advantage of robots' help will help employees to increase their job satisfaction and avoid them to leaving that job place.
Okay, thank you, Cici. Thank you for this interesting question. Now let's move on to our third speaker. Let's move. Okay, so now is Dr. Bandugu Optimus. At the beginning of the section, I have introduced each of you briefly, so I'm sure all the audience know you very well. So I think they cannot wait to listen to your presentation because I need to control the click. So if you want to turn to the next slide, just let me know, okay? Thank you. Oh, what about the microphone? Can we hear from Ben? No? Maybe try the audio. Oh, yes.
Yes, I heard.
Wonderful.
Good.
Hi,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Bandugu Optimus. I'm a food researcher from Rosen College and Hospitality Management. And today I'm going to talk about my published paper in tourism review. The paper is next slide, please. The paper is here. You can read the paper from Google Scholar or using the other channels. The title is, will the decrease in food availability affect food tourism, specifically the future of the food tourism? Next slide, please. You all know food tourism is very beneficial for all destinations, specifically food tourism destinations. Our literature or published article is all about benefits of food tourism or factors. How can we use benefits of food tourism in destinations? So the most of the literature or article focus on the benefits on food tourism, because the research or recent research show us that global culinary or food tourism market was valued at 1.1 trillion, which is a very big money, and is projected to reach 6.2 trillion by 2033. And most of the travelers, 34% of tourists or travelers will visit the places for the food or culinary richness. And 62% of people or visitors or travelers purchase food products or local food products from the destination or cities or the regions. And social media support this food tourism or food related tourism, and main culinary or food tourism destinations located in Europe or in Asia. Next, please. So, but in my paper or in my article, I discuss what type of threats or risks affect or impact our food tourism destinations or future of the food tourism, because food tourism is very vulnerable to external and internal factors, specifically environment-related factors. For example, conflicts or wars, extreme weather events, supply disruptions, they impact or affect food tourism negatively, specifically future of the food tourism. For example, extreme weather events, droughts, floods, unpredictable weather patterns will affect or currently affect agricultural or farming practices. Supply disruption create a big pressure on global food security. That's why most of the experts, food experts, create 4 C's: conflicts, COVID, climate, and cost impact food tourism drastically. Next, please. In this figure or table, you will see how extreme weather trends impact our destinations or regions from 2012 to 2023. The extreme weather trends means tornado, forest fire, hurricane, typhoon, extreme hot weathers, and flood. From 2012 to 2023, you can see some fluctuation, but it's increasing, and which impact our agriculture or farming practices. Next, please. And this figure shows us about water crisis. Some of the destinations or cities or regions in the world are safe. Blue means safe. If the region is marked with blue, these area or regions are safe with the water. But if you see red and orange, which means it's in risk or at risk, these regions or these destinations have at the risk of water. If we don't have any water or limited water, we cannot do farming or agriculture. We cannot produce food enough. That's why the south part of the world has currently water scarcity problem. Next, please. So this map shows food insecurity in the world. If you look at it carefully to map, you will see that African region and African continent has currently in food insecurity. Black spots show us the food crisis. Currently, these black spots or these countries have experienced the food insecurity, which means the destination cannot offer enough food product to visitors as well, because there's a huge level of extreme level of food insecurity in this area. The brown and orange areas or regions or cities or countries have part of food insecurity or food shortage, which is in danger, which means these destinations have in danger or future is not very bright for these destinations. Next, please. So if we don't have enough food, how this issue can affect the food destination or any destination? Population growth is a currently big problem for everywhere, every country. So according to research, our population will be reached 9.7 billion by 2050, which means we need 70% more food to feed for this population. So climate change creates, water scarcity, water crisis in destinations, which means less farming, less agriculture. Unsustainable agricultural practice, which means we are currently losing our biodiversity in the soil, and of course depletion of water resources. And resource depletion cause extreme level of food, less amount of food production in the destinations, which is create a big risk for food destinations, for food tourism. Next, please. So as agricultural productivity decrease, the variety and quality of local food will be diminished. And it creates rising food prices, which is impact or affect affordability of dining experiences for tourists. And also it will discourage travelers for engaging in food-related activities such as cooking classes, food tours, and dining at local establishments, because they all will be very expensive for the travelers, or most of the for travelers. And also it will risk at traditional dishes and local specialities. They are going to be altered or abandoned by locals or restaurants or chefs. And decreased tourist arrivals will affect local business, farmers, and artisans. That's why I think we need to focus on these issues, because our future of food tourism will not be very bright if we have these issues going on. Next, please. So in this slide, I created challenges and potential future research areas about this topic. Like I said, food researchers generally focus on benefits of food tourism and how can improve our food tourism in our destination. But it's not enough, because we are going to face some threats and risks related to food production in many destinations, and also agricultural, environmental, workforce, and public health related issues or political issues. For example, food loss, food waste, it's a big issue in every destination. Water scarcity, water crisis, drought. Future show us famine risk, agricultural issues, resource depletion, sustainability, and marine pollution. Marine pollution is our big problem in everywhere in the world. So we need to focus on marine pollution and climate change, possible future pandemics and epidemics. Our previous experience was not good, specifically in food destinations and all tourism destinations. So we need to dig down of possible pandemics, future pandemics and epidemics as well. So regional wars, we have a war in several regions in the world, for example, Ukraine, Russia, or Middle East. I'm from Turkey, and currently in my country, food prices is very, very extremely high. So this extremely affect or impact our tourism and for tourism destinations. So we are currently experiencing, as a country, we are currently experiencing how high food price affect our food tourism or tourism destinations. So terrorism, other security issues, food supply chain issues, and population growth, poverty, racism, migration issues. Migration is a very big problem in every world, in every destinations. Next, please. And management risks, resilience related problems or issues, local food, local farming, which is under the threat in many countries, income levels, policy updates. Policy updates is a big problem. I worked on policy updates paper 2 years ago, and I saw that when I do research, I saw that many countries in the world, they don't update their food or food production policies or tourism related policies, environmental related policies. So policy updates are very important and very necessary. Guest awareness is our weakest part as a tourism and hospitality industry leaders or researchers, because guest satisfaction is very important to us, very important, and we cannot correct this issue because we need more guests to our destinations, but we sacrifice a lot of things, specifically food or environmental related. So it's a big issue for us as well. And culinary issues, we have new innovations, for example, digital technology, software control, cooking, 3D foods, lab-grown foods. We don't know what's the future of these topics. Are they healthy or are they unhealthy? How can we, offer this type of foods to our guests? Because most of the guests wants to eat local foods or culinary richness or consume local foods, but these foods are not very they are innovative, but they are not very delicious or flavorful foods. But we need to use or offer today or tomorrow, offer these foods to our guests. That's why as a researchers, we need to collaborate. The other disciplines, multidisciplinary teams will dig these problems, and they will solve these problems. That's why multidisciplinary techniques, multidisciplinary teams are very important to understand those issues and solve these problems. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Ben. Do you have any questions from the online? Cici, I cannot see on my side. What about you? Can you see any questions in the chat box?
I do not see any new questions from the audience.
Okay.
So let me ask Benny a question. Benny, you've got two very contradicting terms. On the one side, you've got people who are looking for authentic local food, 0 miles, and enjoy what they find. And at the same time, you find people who are enjoying fusion, and you find sushi in Turkey, and you find kebab in the US. How do you see the two contrasting trends working together, and what effect do they have on tourism?
Well, every region has their own richness, Dimitrios. I mean, you cannot find sushi in Turkey very easily, or you cannot find kebab in America very easily. The only thing we need to focus on local richness and local foods, and how can we improve local foods with the smart or innovative farming practices. So my focus in this article is get rid of the trade as much as we can, because we are going to face these threats very soon, or some destinations we are currently facing these threats. So my point is not finding local richness in the destinations. My focus is how can we get rid of these threats or decrease these threats, amount of these threats for the future guests or for the future of the industry.
Thank you. I think if we do not have any further questions, maybe we will leave it.
Daisy, there's a question in the chat from the audience.
Okay.
How does the promotion of traditional food influence the development of tourism in a specific destination?
Well, it's not about my article, but I can answer your question. Well, traditional foods are very important. As I say, many people, many visitors or travelers visit the destination for traditional food. And it's very important to promote the destination. We all know that, or many articles has already discussed this benefits. But I think most important thing is not focusing on traditional foods, how beneficial traditional foods to promote destination. The focus we have to focus on how can we sustainably produce these traditional foods, because we need sustainability or regenerative techniques to produce traditional foods for the future of the food tourism. If we don't focus on regenerative or sustainable techniques, we are going to lose our traditional foods very soon, which is a very big threat. It's coming to us. So that's why we researchers or industry partners or organizations, we all focus on the threats that are coming to us. And that's in this way we can produce our traditional foods and then offer our foods to the guests successfully or effectively.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Do we have any further questions in the chat box, Cici?
One more question. I think it's pretty simple. So an audience is asking whether your research was concentrated on one specific country or area.
This article is not research, it's perspective article. And even this perspective article, I did a big research to see what's the situation in the world or in specific regions. I didn't do only for specific regions. What I saw when I write this article, what I saw that all regions in the world have some type of threats or risks. Some has water risks, water scarcity risk. Some has agricultural risk. Some has policy update risk, because some of the countries or government or organizations, they don't update their policies and they try to create a sustainable tourism or food tourism events or activities, which is impossible. So every region, even developed countries, not only developing but developed countries, have their own threat or risk or issues. That's why it's not regional. We can talk about the global perspective, but some regions, yes, they have more threats than others.
Okay, thank you, Ben. I think people are very interested in your topic and in your research, but we have to move on because of time. So if we still have
to read the article, they need to read the article.
Yeah.
If they're interested, please read and use and cite the article. Okay.
Read and create. Yes, read and create more meaningful research to understand our trends at least local or regional level. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you. So our very next speaker, Professor Patrick, he's going to talk about the psychological effect of travel. So please, Professor.
Oh, awesome. It's great seeing you all. You guys look amazing that I can see on camera. Great to see you all on the back of the webinar as well. This paper came from about a decade of research has led to here. We had a grant with U.S. Travel Association in 2013 that tried to find out what travel does to benefit the individual. So we do a lot of research to determine how we benefit destinations and attractions and maybe restaurants and hotels, but we don't look at the benefit to the individual. So they wanted to try to find, in fact, they called it the travel effect, and they were trying to determine areas of research and need. So they put together a panel that I was part of, and the panel decided there were 3 distinct areas that travel offers a benefit to, and those were educative, that when we travel we get smarter, the relationship benefits that say that I'm closer to my my kids, I'm closer to my wife, I'm closer to my mom and dad because we travel together. It helps strengthen relationships. And this paper is about the health benefits. So, you know, we realize that when we come home from a vacation, we typically feel less stressed. We like to think we're getting healthier, but there's not a lot of research that has shown for sure whether or not we're psychologically better or physiologically better because of travel. So that led to 3 dissertations that were done, one in each of those areas that the grant that we were awarded did. Those dissertations gave really good preliminary results and led to subsequent research in all 3 areas. And the area that seems most fruitful, and the area that I'm now focused on, is the psychophysiological effects. So we understand that there are benefits. In a paper I completed 2021, and I'll plug my own journal, I apologize, Demetrius, in CC, but it was in Journal of Travel Research that examined, put people onto a cruise. They put heart rate monitors onto them. We studied, and we learned that their hearts actually got stronger. And we had a theoretical base for that. And the findings are some of the first findings to say that because of travel, we might get healthier. So Demetrius then put a call out for these papers, and we realized that there is not a strong review of literature since the ones that we did a decade ago. So that led us to write this paper, which the reviewers went from what we had started with, a comprehensive review, and we're ecstatic that the reviewers suggested a systematic literature review, which greatly evolved the paper. So if you can sneak to the next slide, that would be great. We used the Prisma format, which is the preferred reporting items for systematic literature reviews and meta-analysis. And following that program, we used the words travel and tourism in combination with physiological, psychological, stress, and benefit to figure out what papers on the planet have combinations of those words in them, had to have travel and or tourism or tourist in some format. That led us to 2,391 papers. Once we identified duplicates, that reduced it by 214, so that goes to the second level. We screened the 2,177 papers. We used an extraordinary software, it's called Covidence. We are now in the process of doing 4 other systematic literature reviews in our lab, and all of them are using Covidence. And if you're not familiar with it, to me, I don't know how you do a review without it anymore. First of all, it identified the 2,391 articles, but more importantly, it put it into a usable format that we could review. So Zhao Zhu, my grad student, was added to the paper at this point because the systematic literature review, according to Covidence, needs a minimum of 2 people on it. I will also say we searched 6 different databases to get to the 2,391. And once we get down and reduce to the duplicates, 2 people need to look at every article. So we're at 2,177 articles. When this happened, we had 2 weeks until our paper was due. And I thought there's no way we're getting this done in time. And I panicked, and Zhao Zhu, who'd done Covidence before, she said, this is not a problem at all. And it took me less than a week to read through all 2,177 articles. Zhao Zhu did it the same time I did, and we do it separately. We're not allowed to see each other's results. And you say whether a paper seems to fit precisely into the review you're doing, if it might fit the review you're doing, or if it definitely doesn't. So from that 2,177, we determined that there were 68 papers between us. So we got it down to about 130 until we met and discussed with each other each of those 130 papers, which was a great process to go through with a PhD student. We reduced that down to 68, which we then sat down and thoroughly read the 68, going beyond the methods, going beyond the implications of the study. And we excluded 18 more. And the 18 that were excluded at that point fit the criteria, but we, as the researchers, decided that we didn't want to look at employees. So about half of those 18 that were excluded studied employees' benefits from travel, and the other ones were business travelers. And we wanted to stick with leisure travel. So we do have those studies, which can be used for subsequent type of analyses, but we reduced to just 50 studies. And that led us to a review of studies. And my next slides are horrible. I apologize, but if we can go to the next one. We arranged the findings into 3 areas, and the 3 areas were determined theoretically. So there's a theory that I'm going to show in a little bit. It's called it came out of psychoneuroendocrinology. It's the cognitive activation theory of stress. I think it's a pretty sexy theory. I think it applies to this really well. But it says that the role that our daily lives have on us, which are situational factors, affect us psychologically first. So things occur in our life, psychologically something happens, and then the body has a physiological response. So we realized that our papers had to look at psychological effects and physiological effects. Hence, we termed the title psychophysiological, which is part of the title. These papers were the psychological benefits of the 50 that we saw, and they revealed pretty consistently that travel reduces our stress. A lot of these papers revealed that we come back from travel, and because I have less stress, I'm much more productive at work. And the papers reveal that the longer the studies were conducted, the longer the vacations were, the less stress there were as well. So the 2 Chen papers in there, Chen et al., those were papers I wrote with one of my graduate students, and both of them were done looking at different time periods of vacations. We separated the short 2 to 3 day vacation from week and month-long vacations, and you see the longer the vacation, the better the psychological benefit. One of the things that we also identified was that there is possibility that we can vacation for too long, that we start to have psychological stress because we probably want to get back to our usual environments. We might miss our pets, our family. The stress of work, we know we can't get away from that. As everyone on this webinar is, trying to sneak back to work as quickly as they can, I'm sure. We can go into the next slide. The area of research that was scanned is the physiological benefits. We don't know a lot about what happens to the body. Think about the millions of travelers every year. We knew during COVID that travel was to not be done because of the possible physiological effects, but we don't really know a lot of what has happened to our body. So the good news is that all of these, the studies that did have physiological benefits, all but one of them also had psychological benefits. So they studied them arm in arm, and we learned that they're related to each other. The study that I did in that group, we showed that being on a cruise over an 11-day span, that people's hearts were strengthened during that time. We also learned that we're better able to handle stress, and that likely because our bodies are doing better as well. So the studies in this group came from very divergent areas of study. A lot of these are coming from the medical field. So we're going to have to catch up with the medical field as we move this way. We also, through this review process, realized that there's not just positive effect of travel. So if we can go on to the next slide. There's been a lot of research that shows that negative things happen to our body as well. So we're more likely to consume alcohol and/or legal and/or illegal drugs. We're more likely to get influenza, COVID-19 spread, which multiple studies showed, and we didn't want to look at the determinant of COVID, which was something that we excluded as well. Measles more likely to be transformed, sunburn likely to happen. We can have negative emotions occur. So we've also learned that travel has negative effects. So it's not all, roses that come up when we do travel. So if you want to go on to the next slide, the research showed that since the categories came out and fit cognitive activation of theories of stress well, it suggests this is a really good theoretical framework moving forward. And we've tested it earlier. It seems to fit. Another theory that seems to fit really well is bottom-up theory. Bottom-up spillover theory says that positive things that happen in one area of our life carry over into others. So if I travel and I find satisfaction from that, it brings satisfaction to other areas of my life. If I travel and I'm closer to my wife because of the travel we did, our life together is closer as well. So bottom-up spillover, a definite theoretical base that we saw works really well. And cognitive activation stress, another one that looks to be very promising for this area of study. It says in our literature review confirmed it, that there are things in our life, that activities that some are more likely to cause benefit or negative stress than others. The literature is pretty straightforward for those studies that studied psychological and physiological, that the stress appraisal happens first, as the theory suggests. And our brain says something stressful or something positive happened. Situational variables then, in that short time span from that appraisal, affect our bodies as well. So I was in a situation, my brain felt something. Other situational factors can also intercede and cause a response from my body. That's over time, maybe stress on our bodies that occurs, or stress alleviation during that time. Our bodies over time get that feedback response, and the accumulation of all of these stimuli in our lives cause us to either cope with them. So we had stress. If we cope with them, we get stronger. So these stresses in our lives, if we cope, we get stronger, our hearts get stronger, our brains get stronger. If we're not able to cope with them, our body has strain. So physiologically, it starts to shut down, and mentally we can lead towards helplessness. So that's the theoretical area where we think this research should go, which led to, I believe it was 11 propositions, which we can go to the next slide, my final slide. Oh, excuse me, you can go to go to that slide, thank you. The proposed research agenda that we're suggesting that the gaps showed from the literature and what the areas of future research from those studies suggested is that there's different types of people we need to study. We need to study travelers versus non-travelers. Do travelers over a lifespan have more of a benefit than those people when we hold socio-demographics constant? Do travelers have a better life than those that don't? Are they healthier? We've got haves and have-nots. It's great to say that travel makes us better, but the have-nots don't have as much of a chance to travel. How do we get those benefits to those that don't have it? How can we do proxies if travel is found to strengthen our hearts, to make us psychologically better? We also, from the literature, there's gaps that we don't know how different personality types handle this. Some people do really well outside their usual environment and thrive in it. Others, the risks and the fears that come with security issues are almost too much for them to manage, and travel is detrimental to them. So we need to study that. We need to understand the situational factors that cause it. We're working on a grant right now. I'm doing it with some industrial engineers, and we're studying the role that nature plays during the time that we're outside our usual environment. So what happens to our bodies in an urban environment versus a natural? Ben just did a great presentation on food and what happens when we're on vacation and we overconsume. We studied people during a cruise vacation, and we have the technology, and equivital sensors allow us to have respondents swallow a pill and we can actually see what happens with their digestive system during travel. And that's an area of inquiry that we're writing grants on right now to see what happens with the food that we ingest, and do we ingest too much food? Are we unhealthy during that? What do different activities have on? And if we look at this haves versus have-nots, can VR be a replacement for these possible benefits that we have? So the technological role is an area of inquiry as well. We realize that these variables need to be measured and measured well. It's a fault of a lot of research that could go from good to great. So we need good measures of perceptions of stress. We need really good measures of physiological stress, and that's why I'm working with industrial engineers, because they have the measures and the apps that we don't. And then we need to measure the actual outcomes. Actual outcomes, are we actually healthier, not just perceived to be healthier? So longitudinal studies need to be done. They need to be done over the 5 phases of travel and what's happening at each phase. And we certainly need to ground these in theory so that longitudinally, as we do our studies, other fields can also compare and give more warrant to the studies that we're doing. So that's the best summary I can do in the 10 minutes allotted. So I'm open for any questions y'all might have.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Cece, do you have any questions online? Maybe you have time only for one.
Not yet.
Okay, maybe we leave for last. Right?
Let me ask something, Jim.
Okay.
Jim, do you see wearables coming into supporting a lot of this research?
Demetrius, I got old ears. I'm sorry. Go ahead again.
I said, do you see wearables, technology that you wear?
We do, yeah. So we do. So the technology in watches is greatly improved. So Apple Watches are one of them. Motorola makes a really good one. Polar makes a good one. The best one's an overall wearable. It's a vest that's made by Equivital. It looks for irregular heartbeats. It looks for things. The industrial engineer I work with has a copyright pending, or excuse me, a trademark pending, copyright pending on an algorithm that he's written for stress within each heartbeat. So when we measure heart rate, we get 10 beats per minute with the watches that we're doing. We have 10 pieces of data per second, I should say, excuse me. And the way that one heartbeat goes to the next, so from my first heartbeat within a minute to my second one in that minute, we have 10 pieces of data. If that elevation is quick between each heartbeat, where the elevation goes up quickly and then it descends during it, that's a negative stress. Might have seen a cockroach, I might have got scared, I might have felt fear. If it's positive, so I look across the room and I see, you know, handsome Demetrius and puts a smile on my face, it's a positive stress, right? So those stresses within that heartbeat start out slow and they go fast. So it's the use of these algorithms within the apps and with the monitors as well is where we're getting the great progression right now. So Equivital, if you're looking at getting in this area, is the way to go.
Okay. Thank you.
So Professor Patrick, there is a question from the audience. It said, asking you, are you considering the generational?
Yeah,
I think that's a typo, so I don't know what.
And so their generational theory says that based on the life occurrences that we have, we react to situations differently, and I think that's a great area of future inquiry. You know, we've got a group of COVID babies that are going through. They went through junior high and they lost socialization skills potentially. You know, prior to COVID, millennials were very experiential, and they were much more likely to travel than any generation before them. Well, COVID put fear of travel into a lot of people. So I think generational analysis would be a great fruitful area to study, because, you know, a lot of this younger generation went through 18 to 24 months for a lot of people where they weren't allowed to travel, let alone, you know, get outside their usual environment, but definitely couldn't get on a plane for quite a while. So I think that's a great future area.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for the presentation. So I think we need to move on to our very last presentation by Farad. So time is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, greetings to everyone. Many thanks to all panelists for their interesting and great presentation. As more than 1.5 hours already passed, you must have been tired, so I will try my best to not to keep the presentation long. So before moving to the sections, I want to shortly describe that, as you all know, there has been a growing discussion on the negative influences of tourism consumption and production on the environment. And this raises concerns about the sustainability of tourism regarding responsible consumption and production. In this regard, focusing on SDG 12 and automation in tourism, we try to answer the question of how tourism and automation will work to create a world with more sustainable production and consumption patterns. Could you please move to segment? This slide shows the content of the presentation. So I will start with the past developments, then move to lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. Past developments, we can say that the involvement of automation in production has led to a shift in the nature of services. And the emergence of service automation can mainly be attributed to mass production and efforts to decrease unit costs. And service automation help routinize service operations and standardize work procedures. This resulted in faster, more convenient, and low-cost production. The highlighted, yellow highlighted statement shows the relationship between automation and tourism and hospitality industry. It is evident that the automation of tasks in various industries has led to the emergence of leisure time, because machines have taken over several tasks previously done by humans. So this has been the foundation for the growth of the tourism and hospitality industry. Previously, automation was described as any single or multiple functional machine or group of machines performing a predetermined sequence of tasks. However, with the development of technology, even the definition of automation went beyond this and refers to the processes or services performed by autonomous agents or machines with minimal human intervention. In the 1970s, the scientific community realized that unsustainable development led to economic and environmental collapse. Since then, sustainable development has been considered the only option for the survival of humankind. In addition, as a sustainable development goal emphasized by the UN, sustainable consumption and production plays an essential role in promoting SD. Could you move to the next slide, please? Technology has played a strategic role in for tourism and hospitality firms during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as you all know, various technologies such as service robots, drones, QR codes, mobile apps, kiosks, chatbots, and other technologies helped companies to decrease their costs and cash outflows to remain liquid during the pandemic. However, the pandemic persuaded many employees of tourism and hospitality to look for a career in other sectors that didn't suffer so much. And potential students of tourism and hospitality decided to enroll in other programs, which hurt the future labor supply in the sector. And demography will continue to force many companies to automate processes, not because they want to, but because there are insufficient potential employees in the labor market. And additionally, we can say that pandemic was acknowledged as a chance to make tourism more sustainable because it led to the development of local, domestic, and virtual tourism, and also helped reduce emissions by decreasing travel. In the next slide, please. And this figure shows the role of tourism automation in achieving SDG 12, Sustainable Development Goal 12. Here we elaborated on how automation technologies can help tourism companies achieve SDG 12 by looking separately at the impacts on sustainable production and consumption patterns. I will start with sustainable production patterns and mention some of them shortly. For example, improved forecasting. Improved AI algorithms and the abundance of precise and relevant data will allow companies to make better forecasts. For example, on the macro level, seasonal patterns of tourist arrivals to the destination can be forecasted. And on the micro level, demand for their products on a daily basis can be forecasted. And service capacity, automation technologies will limit wasteful practices and allow larger markets to be served. And efficient use of resources and energy. This can be, for example, generative AI may facilitate the work of the chefs by recommending recipes based on the available food ingredients in restaurants. And in hotels, movement detectors can help with saving electricity in common areas of hotels. And also in rooms, the sensors will detect the presence of guests and adjust the temperature of the room. Educate visitors. Automation technologies may be used to educate visitors and encourage the consumption of local products and services. This can be done by holograms in tourist information centers, airports, or visitor attractions. Now I will move on to sustainable consumption patterns, and I will also mention some shortly. Sustainable criteria in decision-making algorithms. Tourists will benefit from AI applications with embedded sustainability criteria in their decision-making algorithms. And in this regard, unsustainable travel routes, accommodation establishments, and food and beverage outlets will either be not bookable or appear at the bottom of the search results. This will nudge tourists to book services of companies with sustainable operations, which can have a direct positive effect on the sustainability of their consumption patterns. This also indirectly affect the sustainable production patterns. AI can help tourists book trips in ways that optimize their time, price, and environmental footprint. In doing so, the use of resources and emissions can be decreased, although it may not be eliminated entirely. Nudging. Sending notifications if individual consumption goes beyond the sustainability criteria. AI applications will track the consumption of tourists and send notifications if it goes beyond the sustainability criteria. So I will, please, next slide. I will conclude the study by an important note. Here I would like to state that the responsible production and consumption of technologies and technological tools is also necessary and must be taken into account. Although I emphasize the aspects of automation and its effect that can contribute to sustainable production and consumption, technological development, production, and the use of these technologies must not have negative environmental effects. For instance, the production of automation technologies such as robots and batteries relies on rare earth materials, and this can negatively affect the environment. And it may hinder the achievement of SDG 12 in tourism and hospitality. In this regard, key players in technological development and regulation sites like governmental institutions must ensure that such environmental effects are not occurring or at least minimized. Thank you. There will be all. I'm open to any question.
Thank you. Cici, do we have any question online for Farag?
No, not yet.
Okay. I think as we finish all the presentations, we would like to thank again for all the panelists. Dimitris, as we already exceeded the time we scheduled, do we still have the general discussion on some of the topics, or we think it's fine for today?
First of all, thank you very much to all the panelists and for your contribution, and particularly thank you to our colleagues who are based in Asia. So it's 1 o'clock for Daisy, and for the colleagues who are supporting us with the technology, and I really appreciate all that. I think we're not going to let them go just yet. We're just going to open the conversation for another 10 minutes to finalize the conversation, because we had a feast of different ideas and a lot of different things. Let's ask Dick as the person who is older than the journalist. He admitted early on. What did he hear, Dick, from all the panelists here, and what was something that really surprised you? While Dick is preparing to answer this, if we've got any questions for any of the panelists or for the whole panel, please put them on the chat. And for the people on the control, you can now remove the poster, please, so we can see ourselves on a bigger screen. Thank you. So,
okay,
Dick.
so we stop sharing.
Okay. Well, nothing surprising, because I had looked at all the papers before, so I had some context of where the speakers were coming from. I think the one that fascinated me, scared me a bit, is Jim Patrick's stuff on what tourism and travel actually does to us. I won't say they're surprising, but they are, to me, extremely interesting to find out what tourism, how it alters perhaps our impressions as well as our physiological structure. I mean, we hear a lot about travel broadens the mind and that sort of generalization. I think it's fascinating to find out in detail, as Jim is doing, what actually happens. And I think with the technologies we're getting, which several of the other speakers, including the last one, talked about, we're going to be able to do that better and more comprehensively. I still have some concerns about how you deal with drunken British tourists traveling in Europe and finding out what impact tourism has on them. And I was a bit disappointed with James that you didn't look at the employees, because with the comments some of the other speakers have made, the impact of tourism on the employees, I think, is a really fertile area for you to, you don't need to broaden out, but to look at as well. I've often wondered what happens to somebody who spends their working life dressed up as Mickey Mouse in a Disney resort. That surely must have physiological and psychological effects. So I think there's a massive stuff there. I mean, the other topics, I think the disheartening thing is that we've all got different priorities, different interests, and we've all got, I think, extremely valuable lines of research, food shortage, automation, and so on, that we're never going to be able to resolve all of them. And it would be nice to be able to have somebody up above linking us all together. But increasingly, as knowledge goes, we become more separate into our chosen areas. We have to because of the way research works. And I think sessions like this are particularly valuable because they do force us, is the wrong word, but they do encourage us to look at weird stuff that other people are doing that normally we wouldn't, because we've got enough to do in our own areas. And so to learn about the difficulties with food production, yes, I know food production is a problem and so on, but to learn more about it is valuable and something that I wouldn't normally have spent my time doing. So I think these sort of sessions, and I really thank Demetrius and Daisy for putting this one together, I think do us a lot of good. Whether it really helps tourism a lot, I'm not sure, but it's helped me and been interesting and informative from what the others have said that I wouldn't normally have got.
Jim, I think that's a good point. Any plans for looking to the employees? You're probably muted, Jim. But again, you know, quite often, Dick, you find situations where we are talking on behalf of the employees, but actually, if you see what's the alternative of what they will be doing, if they are not doing that, the alternative is much worse.
Yeah, I took notes from Dr. Butler's suggestion, and we're working on 2 grants right now related to this, and we'll make sure we put it into one of them, because at the employee side, you know, we got to take care of our own and try to understand this. I think that's a great area for future research, and we excluded from the current one only because we didn't want the findings would be too confounded by including the employee results with the tourists, because one in a state of leisure, the other one in the exact opposite. So that's why they were excluded here, but that doesn't mean we're going to exclude them for future research.
Great. Benny, what did you find useful or strange or something remarkable?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
All topics were wonderful. I learned a lot from all topics: sustainability, automation, physiological and psychological changes during travels, and others. They were very good, and I learned a lot. So there is no negative comments, never ever.
Yeah.
So I think food is also important for the food tourism research, but when I listen to other presentations, I produce new topics combined with the other presentations. So it's the best way to, you know, create the topic, to listen to other experts, other professions. For example, how can I combine food research with the travel psychology or travel physiology or sustainability or automation, which was a very good, for me, very good experience.
Thank you. And I think this is exactly why we're doing the cross-fertilize research across different areas. So Farouk, what was for you?
I think all papers are interesting and can guide future research. And I congratulate the tourism review team and this initiative, because I think these perspective papers open new doors for researchers. And as Dr. Bendeku stated before, researchers should read horizon papers and see what is interesting for them to empirically delve into. So I think it's pretty good and enlightening session and the initiative. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Farouk. So last word, Jim, do you have something to add, or are you done?
I could talk all day, Demetrius. I'm in the middle
I
of
know.
Yeah. No,
I'm looking at Daisy and she's kind of saying.
Yeah. I'm going to amplify what Dick said, right? We live in our own silos and we get our head buried down in the sand. And for the young researchers on here, I challenge you to read papers outside of your comfort area. And, you know, the joy that we get as editors, we get to read papers across the spectrum. And I think that's the greatest joy that I have in our field, is being able to do that. So don't read a paper or go to a presentation only because it's in your wheelhouse, because we're all connected in some manner, and all of these studies, we could draw connections and put together a superpower type team of researchers to study more global issues versus these smaller one-shot studies that don't have as much impact.
Thank you. Last word to Tete and to Daisy. So Tete, what did you learn? What do you enjoy? What do you disagree? What do you agree? What do you like to happen next?
So yeah, I enjoyed all the presentations and I learned a lot. So everyone is coming from a different background. Some are kind of like I have kind of cross interest, but some to me is very totally new. And I did some I collected some psychological data before, and I found it really, really hard to analyze that. So maybe I need to reach out to Professor Patrick to learn how to do that. And I also did some technology studies, so I echoed what Frank said. So yeah, I think this is very, very informative for new researchers. And I want the new researchers, the attendees, to pay attention to the future research directions all the presenters pointed out, because those are very promising areas that they can conduct some future researches in. So I think that's my final word.
Thank you so much. Daisy, 1 o'clock in the morning.
No, 2 o'clock. We have 8 hours difference now.
Oh, sorry, Daisy. Sorry.
I'm still awake. Fine. I really enjoy listening to all the presentations, and I feel this is really our pleasure that each of you expert in your own field, and you gave some ideas, insights from your view, and most importantly, you direct the future agenda. So especially for younger generation scholars, this is really a short path to them to understand this field. And I even identify, for example, among all of us, for example, from Ben's food tourism, and then what about if this connect with the technology by Farag, how to the multisensory tourism for food in the future. This is a lot of things, in my mind, but I really appreciate this kind of presentation webinar. But thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so let me say thank you to everybody. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to Tete and to Jerry for putting that together. And thank you to Daisy that she did extra work tonight. So here's Gary and our Emerald team that is based in Malaysia. And again, for them, it's very, very late. We appreciate William and everybody else for all your support. Thank you very much, guys. Make sure that you read the tourism review papers. Make sure that you give them to your students. We had about I think the maximum we got is about 200 people tonight, and there's still more than 100 people waiting and joining us tonight or this morning, depending on where you are. I promise you the next webinar will be Asian friendly, so it will be at the time that Tete will suffer and then Daisy will be smiling. That's how we're rotating, so everybody's suffering a little bit and enjoying a little bit. Thank you very much for everybody. Actually, before you go, let's take a picture of that where you've got all this nice big smiling. Pretend that you really enjoy. Come on, Daisy, open the eyes, open the eyes. Open the eyes. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Right.
Hope to see you soon. Thank you for your contributions. Wonderful conversations. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay,
bye-bye, everyone. See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you, William. Thank you, Daisy, and everybody else.